In the 1950s, the Denver and Rio Grande Western finally relented and began actively promoting its Silverton branch to tourists. After the efforts of many, which included longtime Rio Grande conductor Alva Lyons, staved off the elimination of this now world-renowned piece of railroad. With the promotion of the line came Hollywood, and Hollywood wanted the in vogue Western movies, of which the Grand obliged, lending their railroad to the various productions such as Run for Cover, Night Passage, Support Your Local Gunfighter, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and Denver and Rio Grande. Except for the latter, the railroad could not provide truly period-correct locomotives. It didn't help matters much that they had destroyed 2 of them in the climax of that movie. Instead, the fairly young 30-something-year-old remaining 470s, the K-28s, would take up starring roles dressed up with box headlights, gaudy paint jobs, and stack shrouds to mimic the diamond stacks of the 19th century locomotives. It was the equivalent of dressing a 1955 Thunderbird as a Model T. When the movie work was over though, the paint and headlights would generally revert to the Rio Grande standard. But to keep that old Western feel for the tourists, the stacks remained until the inaugural season of the Durango and Silverton, which took over in 1981. The 1972 season of the Silverton opened with all 3 of the 470s receiving fresh paint in the Durango Roundhouse, since Alamosa was no longer an option with the lifting of the San Juan extension between Durango and Chama. Many obvious and subtle details on the locomotive's appearance in the 1972 season would be noticeable for the next decade and well into the 21st century, such as the front number plates receiving extra large, thicker silver numerals, gold re-railing frogs, and even fresh painted Rio Grande heralds. But the left-hand stencil that typically lettered out the fireman's side was lost, and so both sides would carry the right-hand leaning herald until repainted in 1981. All these details would be recreated in 2022 for the railroad's Fall Photographers Train, themed 50 years ago on the Rio Grande. In addition to just lettering the passenger cars with Denver and Rio Grande Western in the circus font, another detail that event coordinator Russell Herritt was able to recreate was turning the early 60s era built 330 series coaches, which would lead these trains having their restrooms on the lead. This operating practice continued until the end of Rio Grande operations. So join us as we venture back now over 50 years ago on the Silverton branch to catch what could have been a typical end-of-season train 461 or train 463. We start our journey from 2022 to 1972 as we leave Durango behind, first catching the special, leaving Durango, crossing the intersection of Main Street and Camino del Rio. Near 36th Street, the 476 threads the gap between the old homes and the new Animas River Trail along this stretch of railroad. In the glacial Hermosa Valley, we pass Home Ranch Siding, an addition to the railroad since the transfer from the Rio Grande to the Durango and Silverton, one of the few changes to this line since leaving Durango in 1972. Deep in the shadows of the Hermosa cliffs, the train races along the tangents and banks into one of the few curves in this narrow valley. Hermosa, the first water stop since leaving Durango, will have its tank car body sit full again today as the 476 highballs without picking up water. With the bigger locomotives now in use, the tank here is rarely used and the wooden one has been supplanted with this newer setup. The shadows still have yet to pierce the ever-deepening chasm of the Animas Canyon, as we're at Tacoma, shooting from the bridge that leads to the hydroelectric plant here. Finally, at Needleton, we're in the daylight as we make a couple of passes along this scenic meadow below the imposing vista of Mountain View Crest. Further towards Silverton, we're hugging the Animas as the 476 shoots the gap here at milepost 486.4. At milepost 492, we detrain at Whitehead Gulch, where a scramble up the talus slopes here takes us to this view of the majestic Needle Mountains piercing the sky. Arriving in Silverton, we see the 476 passing the original depot that has stood here since the beginning of service over 140 years ago. At the intersection of 12th and Blair Streets, we watch as the 476 rounds the curve from the depot, out of sight on this piece of track that was built here in the mid-century to allow tourists to be dropped off right in the middle of town. The old arcade, a curio shop, here has been many the backdrop of many family photos and postcards since then. The special has backed down to the scale house track, a siding just south of the depot, where it sits in the hole to allow train 463, led by K36 number 480, to pass. Until the strengthening of bridges and widening of cuts by the new Durango and Silverton in 1981, these locomotives were never able to pass Rockwood, but now have displaced the older K28s from their exclusive use on the line. Heading southbound, we're at Elk Park, where 476 crosses the Animas on the newer 1964-built deck plate girder bridge as we both shoot from the original bridge and as it stands in the background. Needleton Tank is a stop for water in both directions, and while today is no different, the wooden one is out of service. So the locomotive is replenished out of sight from the old tank car body around the corner. In 1972, this would have been second to last season for this tank before the new one came online. Between Needleton and Teft, we find ourselves near milepost 480, where we're treated to views of the majestic Needle Mountains, which pierce the sky, nearly reaching 14,000 feet above sea level, and still stretch well over a mile higher than we are at. Teft, near the halfway point of the railroad, finds the tracks crossing the emerald waters of the Animas for the third time as the special steams southward. Finally, we reach the world-famous Horseshoe Curve, which sits on the high line's lofty perch above the Animas River, hundreds of feet below. And here, we'll leave the 476 and 1972 and return to our present time. We'd like to thank you for watching as we've experienced 50 years ago on the Silverton.
The Colville Indians of upstate Washington call him Sasquatch.
Big deal! Big deal! It's the real big deal! Ah! It's a real... what is that?
Hey guys, big deal here. Care for another video in these trying times? Well, check out one of these here. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't already, make sure you click subscribe. I'd like to thank you for watching. Make sure you click like if you really like this video. And if you didn't, let me hear in the comments. We'll see you next time on the next one.